Okay, so Michael, thank you for taking the time to talk to me and the students at the University of Waterloo. You do a very interesting job, and especially interesting over the last several weeks as we've been dealing with the virus. You've been working with 3M. Can you tell me about the job that you do today for 3M? You, as I understand it, work on innovation and performance, particularly in manufacturing.
Yes, well, again, thanks for the invitation. It's my pleasure to speak with you today. I've been with 3M for 34 years, and my current role is what we call operational technology. I manage a group of people that scout and research new ways to help operations. Some people refer to what we do as lean. We've kind of dropped that word. We don't really like the word lean because it implies downsizing and kind of squeezing blood out of a turnip. So we just call it operational technology, anything that we can do to support the people in our operations, which does, of course, include lean methods. But we've gone beyond that into aspects of technology, software, performance coaching, leadership coaching, all the people aspects as well.
And all the important aspects that are required to get it all to work.
Right.
So operations management is, usually assumed to be about managing operations activity that changes very little, if at all, from year to year. How true is that today? I think it's not so true, but what do you think?
Yeah, manufacturing and operations have a tradition of not changing and being very static, kind of being behind the times. If it's not broken, you don't need to fix it. But I guess what I've learned in the last, especially 10 years, the rate of change is accelerating in technology, in the workforce, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then obviously the customer requirements and just the whole business thing. So customer requirements are changing faster, expectations are being elevated. So I think in manufacturing operations, we are forced to change one way or another. And we're trying to stay ahead of that. Again, the light bulb went off about 10 years ago and said, we want to get ahead of the curve. We don't want to be lagging. We don't want to be stuck in tradition. Lots of best practices, lots of great traditions that we don't want to mess with, but we want to challenge that and try to move forward.
Absolutely. And I've read a lot about 3M over the years. I've seen lots of references there about 3M that talk about it having a very strong innovation culture. A lot of people look to you as being leaders in this field. So could you talk about the culture at 3M?
Yeah, there is a lot of press on us over the years. I will admit. I want to start by when I first joined 3M. I had a history with the company. My father was a 3Mer, so I was aware of the culture, the overall business, how they treated people, where the locations were, products. And during my interview with 3M, I basically said, I want to work for 3M because they've got 60,000 products plus. We still do today, and I don't want to be bored. And so that was my motivation. But not what you read in the press, excuse me, is the 15% time and some of the innovation things that are going on, and that's usually referring to our laboratories. And what it really means is individuals are allowed up to 15% of their time to pursue kind of pet projects. And hopefully they're business related, they're tied to what you're working on, but they're little excursions from the norm. And what I found in my career, I've been very fortunate that whether I'm in manufacturing or a lab or Six Sigma or supply chain, I've been offered sometimes even up to 20% of time to pursue outside interests. Ultimately, that turned into the group that I run today. All that scouting and looking for new stuff and innovating, it really turned into a full-time job for me over the last 5 years. Personally, I've also experienced the culture from the inside. It's a very collaborative culture, mostly. It's not absolute. But I've walked down the hall in a laboratory and just knocked on doors and asked for help. Hey, does anybody know about, this technology or this application or this material? And usually it ends up a really interesting conversation, and it ends with, how can I help you? Let's work on this together, or here's somebody else you should meet because they know more than I do. And that tends to be the hallway conversation at our 3M Center.
Well, and that's pretty simple in some ways, in that what you've just said is that if you ask for help from someone, they're usually happy to help you, which doesn't happen in every organization.
No,
people are often in their own bubbles and they don't want to come out and help others. So you're describing something that is quite special in many ways.
Yeah, it really is. And it's, again, don't believe everything you read, but there is a culture of collaboration, innovation, pushing the envelope, that is just, it's always there. Which now, going forward with increasing business challenges and things like that, it's getting harder and harder to maintain that. And I think with the workforce changing and hiring experienced people versus people growing up in the 3M culture, there are certainly some challenges for maintaining it. Fortunately, there's enough of us champions running around saying, hey, this really works, let's keep it going.
And that was really my next question, was around, as the organization grows and perhaps as it changes more quickly, you've mentioned that there are some challenges there about how to retain the innovation culture. Could you say a little bit more about what your experience of that is, and how you think that organizations can deal with it?
Well, again, from a very personal standpoint, I've been fortunate to work in groups and work with leaders that are very pro innovation. They're not stuck in their ways. They actually look for things to improve. So part of it is choosing where to work and who you work for and work with. And I think I've navigated that pretty well. I've turned down some jobs where I could see that the business was very stagnant, the manufacturing plants hadn't had much innovation. They weren't getting new equipment, new technology. So again, but you're asking more about the whole corporation. So I think all it takes is a few of us running around doing this sort of innovation culture check and saying, hey, that doesn't look right. We're stuck. Maybe we should go back to this innovation style. Maybe we should bring in some new people, shake up the team a little bit. Whatever it takes to kind of reignite that. But there's definitely pockets of stagnation. I think all businesses face that. They get, we've been making this product the same way for 37 years. Don't mess with it. That happens, sure.
And what you're describing as far as your job goes is that your job is to go out and stimulate innovation to make it happen. Yes. You're identifying some areas are easier to do that in than others, but you're also saying that if you can get it to happen in some areas, it kind of pushes and encourages it to happen elsewhere as well. It's about getting fertile places for it to grow, which are going to spread elsewhere.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, I touched on this a little bit, but the speed of change in the workforce, people are changing jobs very quickly, sometimes less than 2 years. And so it's pretty hard to innovate and deploy and actually get stuff done in a 2-year time period. Mm-hmm. So we're constantly fighting that battle. Do you have somebody that's going to carry the flame, get it done, versus just switching jobs and jumping to a new opportunity? And I think that's just part of our culture now. In the world, people expect change. They expect to change jobs, and so we're trying to manage that as well. I think it's hard to innovate in a 2-year time window. I think you need 5 to find something, try something, do it, get it deployed, and really find out if it's going to work for you.
It's a really interesting point that that continuity of people in positions it has an impact on innovation. People are changing, then they don't have the commitment to the project perhaps, or the innovation that's being made, and that disrupts the innovation process. So a very important point. The next thing I wanted to touch on was lean manufacturing at 3M. You mentioned it initially. You said you don't call it lean. That seems very like a very good thing to me. It reminds me. I had someone who taught me when I was at university what he called group technology. We still call it group technology.
Oh, yeah.
And he said it was also called cellular manufacturing. He said, but I never call it that because you're making people think they're going to jail when they're going to work in cells. So I thought, yeah, that makes sense. So I thought of that immediately when you said you don't call it lean. Makes sense. How important is the lean approach to 3M today?
Well, I think it's still relevant. I don't think that's gone away. I think it's relevant for anybody in manufacturing. I benchmark a lot of companies, and they're all doing lean deployments and trying to get on that bandwagon. It's been around 15, 20 years in the U.S. 3M really started formally with lean in about 2005. With bringing in some Toyota consultants and reading some books and all that. So we were probably a little bit behind the curve in terms of the formal stuff. But we go all the way back to, world-class manufacturing and some of the Schoenberger books. And so really the concepts have been around a lot longer. We just formalized kind of a lean initiative in 2005. So, my division and my team have really been focusing on deploying the tools and getting better and better at that. Maybe the first 5 years I was in the division I'm in now, there was a lot of that, just getting our hands around the fundamentals. The last 5 years has been a lot more fun, challenging that, new methods, customizing methods, focusing on the people side, how's it actually affecting the person? How do you engage them differently? How do you make them more competent at their job more quickly? Training, onboarding, mistake proofing, all that kind of stuff has become very important. And the traditional methods, again, nothing wrong with them, but it's in the application, and it's really in the coaching and the conversation. So again, very relevant today, but you really got to take that people side seriously. And I think if you go back 25 years and you read the Toyota books, they say that it's all in the books. We just didn't do it. It was easy to grab a shiny tool or a method and say, hey, look at us. And sometimes, we even admit it. We got to do the tool and understand that before we can actually dig deeper. So I get it. I wouldn't do it that way today if I were to start over. But for where we were and what we were doing, I can't really criticize. At least we're on the journey, right? I guess that's the most important thing.
Yeah, which a never-ending journey. We usually talk about lean as, and of course, lean, as you say, has always had the two sides: the technical, if you like, the system changes that you're making, and at the same time, the people side, which is a fundamental change to the work that people will do. Before we get on to talking a bit more about people, I thought we might just talk a little bit more about your consulting role and the things that you need to do to get that to happen. So, as you go in to try and improve lean or to be involved in whatever innovation you're doing, how do you approach that as a consultant wanting that to happen effectively?
Yeah, and that's also a bit of a moving target because it really depends on the personalities involved, sort of the state of the business, the state of the culture that you're walking into. I think it was really easy early on to come in with a toolkit and say, I'm here to train you on the tools, and everybody follows, this protocol. Some places that took and some places it didn't. Today, it's more about the relationship with the leaders and just asking them, what's your pain point? What are you seeing? What are your business needs? What kind of culture do you have? Digging into that a little bit. And, then building relationship with these leaders so they have some trust. I'm sorry, I've got a phone ringing in the back.
That's okay. Good to hear.
Okay, it's done. So yeah, if you build a relationship with these leaders and they start to see a track record that you're listening to them, you're bringing them solutions, then they'll start pulling, and they'll call you and say, hey, I've got this problem. You've helped me in the past. What do you got? And also, I have the opportunity to travel to multiple sites and also benchmark externally. So when I can tell them a story of, well, so-and-so had a problem and this is how we approached it, it gives me some credibility. I've seen it before, I've done it before, this isn't new. We're going to customize it, certainly, to your situation. But I think bringing that experience and those stories really puts people at ease. It's funny because I'm a trained engineer. I have the personality type of an INTJ. Making cold calling clients and being a salesman is not a natural thing for me. So it's great when they start calling me, because then I don't have to be the salesman. I can just offer help when they ask. Well, that's been a huge thing.
And when you're engaged in consultancy, there often is this pressure to sell, but at the same time, that doesn't always go with all the other things that you need to be an effective consultant and make a change really happen. Being able just to go in and talk about it is quite different from being able to do it sometimes, and those require different skills, right?
Well, and I think, even when I was a process engineer, you had to justify everything financially and, show the economics and the payback. And there's certainly still a lot of that, in my role and going forward. But I'm finding pockets where that's not actually the driving force, where people just want to get better. They want to solve the problem, and the finances will follow. And again, it has to do with trust. You've had a track record of good stuff. They're not going to ask, for you to hit the bottom line in the first month. They know it's coming and they've seen it in the past, so they're willing to work with you. So I spend a little less time justifying, the work or the project or the approach, but it's still there. I mean, if I can say, I can do a 50% reduction or of cost or a 400% increase in productivity, it certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and and that seems to be very important in managing change. Most people will support change if they are confident it's going to do something good. But if they don't have that confidence, then it's unlikely you're going to get their support.
Right. That's very true.
Seems fairly obvious, but isn't always, I think, necessarily understood. Turning then to shop floor employees being, clearly important in what we do. Have you seen their skills changing in recent years? We've heard a lot about how technology would cause jobs to disappear, to become more unskilled or insecure. Have you seen that in manufacturing where you've been working?
Yeah, I've read those articles. I've seen those trends as well, and I don't buy it. Yes, the job skills are changing, but I think we're upskilling. We're asking more of people. Some real simple things like computer skills. The ability to do email and spreadsheets, and even give a presentation. During an executive visit. I mean, we'll do that right on the shop floor, and grab an operator that had an idea and say, "You get to present your idea." And at first that's a little shocking. Hey, presentations are for management. No, they're not anymore. So we do poster talks on the floor and things like that. And I personally have been involved in a lot of that, coaching people to try to, hey, you got to tell your story. It's your story. I'll coach you and listen the first time, but when the visitors come, you're going to tell the story. I think there's also been an increase in mechanical skills. We expect people to, do autonomous maintenance, fix things. We ask a lot of questions on the shop floor when we hire people about, did you grow up on a farm, fixing farm implements? Have you rebuilt an engine? Those are great skills to have. Things are still very, very mechanically oriented. Another one that comes up constantly is safety awareness. You can never be safe enough. So I think our expectations of individuals having this sort of internal safety, thing is a requirement. It's a skill we try to develop. We want a high level of safety awareness, of a high level of observation of safety opportunities. and the ability to coach through it, and not just point fingers and audit stuff, but just have a conversation. Hey, is that really the safest way to do that? Is there a better way? How can we minimize our risk? Things like that. The other thing, and I think you and I talked about this on the phone, was the whole idea of continuous improvement as a job expectation. We bring people in and say, the job will change, and it may be more labor intensive, less labor intensive. But no matter what the situation is, we want ideas for improvement. We want to be able to understand when things aren't going well. We want, an alert. We want root cause analysis. We want ideas. We want you to try implementing solutions, as you go. And we're setting that as a job expectation. To me, that's a huge upskilling thing. You're not here just to do the job. You're here to improve the job. So those are just some examples. Again, technology, computer, mechanical, safety, and then of course, continuous improvement.
Absolutely, and we're seeing more organizations put more effort and emphasis on continuous improvement these days. Partly, because they're changing so quickly as organizations themselves, and they need everybody to contribute to the success of that if it's going to be effective and if they're going to compete more effectively than their competitors.
Right.
You've talked about the changing roles of employees from an employer point of view. Are you seeing any changes in the expectations of the employees themselves? Talked a lot about we haven't talked, but there has been a lot of talk about generational differences and and their approaches to work. Have you seen anything there that causes the organization to change the way it does things?
Well, yeah, that's one thing that you can believe what you read, because it's true. The workforce, the expectations, from the shop floor all the way to engineers, technical people, even management. I think everybody's expectations are kind of changing. I'll say I honestly believe that 3M still believes in lifetime employment. People with 25, 30, 35, 40 years is not uncommon. So we still believe in that. But I'm not sure the employees all do. And so we're trying to manage that, right? We're having rewards and incentive programs for 5 years of service and 10 years of service. We're creating career pathways that you can do. You can switch paths. Instead of leaving the company, you can jump to another area of the company. And the training opportunities, the technology, we're trying to attract people with that, saying, hey, this is a great environment. You're always going to be leading edge. There's an old saying, we'll hire Einstein, but we won't give him a calculator. Well, we're trying not to be that guy. We want to hire you and equip you for success and for long-term success. But the trend is we do lose more people than we used to. It's just the way it is. So the culture is not really aligning to this idea of loyalty. So we're still navigating that. I've seen a big change in the last 10 years. Prior to that, there were pockets of it, but it was still easier to manage. I think it's been much more challenging in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the things you describe, I'm seeing elsewhere, where younger workers are now expecting more of a career path, more opportunities to develop their skills and be challenged in the jobs that they'll do. And in many ways, I think it's a good thing. The continuous improvement benefits from this, that they want to show what they can do, they want to make changes, they want to stretch their skills, and continuous improvement often will provide opportunities to do that.
Yeah, well, and I tell the story that I mentioned earlier, with 60,000 products and 228 locations, we can provide variety. So if you think you're going to be bored, that's not an excuse at 3M for sure. Now, I know a lot of smaller manufacturers that can't say that. And so they have to be even more creative, I think.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Because they don't have all the wide variety of possibilities that there are at 3M.
Mm-hmm.
So For someone to lead in the environment that exists today, what do you think are the most important characteristics for an operations leader today?
Yeah, that's, boy, of all the questions you've thrown at me, that's the hard one. It's a really long list. And you know, as an individual, you've got to sort of, you know, pick from that list, you know, what you think you can do and what you can't. So a couple things that come to mind, in no particular order here, is experience in other disciplines. So when I meet a leader, plant manager, director, higher level leader that's been in supply chain, that's been in engineering, that's done some Six Sigma work, that maybe worked in multiple locations, immediately I've got a whole different level of respect for them. They've been around. Okay, and when I talk to them as a consultant, and I bring up supply chain issues, I know they resonate with that. I know they understand what I'm talking about. So I really look at that broadening experience. If they've got 2, 3, 4, 5 years experience in those areas, that's a huge thing for me. Personality, we touched on that a little bit earlier. A lot of our leaders in a manufacturing company are engineers. A lot of them don't have much personality. They're not salesmen. They don't communicate well. So if you can get into that, somehow find a way to get good at it, and deal with personality types, with diverse thinking, effective dialogue, Q&A, just being able to have a good conversation. The obvious stuff like conflict resolution and kind of team building. Again, that's not something that comes to the top of an engineer skill set typically. I know I'm being very general here, but it isn't, and it's critical. It really is. We mentioned continuous improvement and problem solving for operators. I think it's really important for our leaders as well. They need to understand the toolkit and how to coach to it. How to ask better questions. I'm rethinking even some of my coaching, where sometimes I'll say, instead of saying, how can I help? I will say, what help do you need? And that's a subtle continuous improvement coaching style that changes the conversation. So I'm not here to save you. If you're a director or plant manager, I'm not here to fix all your problems, but I am here to listen and rally the support that you might need. So I'm going to be an advocate. I'm going to be a resource instead of I'm going to solve all your problems. So you've probably heard the term Gemba walk as well. Again, way popularized and misused. But when people walk around and have this kind of conversation, what help do you need? What problems do you have? Show me where we're deviating from a standard. Boy, even high-level leaders that can coach and have that conversation, which is more of the intent of a Gemba walk. It's not a witch hunt. It's not a waste walk. It's not an audit. It's really walking around saying, how are things going? How could things be better? What help do you need? Real simple definition of a Gemba walk. That's much more effective. And I also like to end the conversation by saying, if we solve that problem, or if we have to resolve this issue, will that move the business forward? Will that actually delight our customer? Will it make us more successful as a company versus your pet problem or your issue that may be just associated with you, something you don't like? So that's a good filter. And the more a leader can do that effectively, I think the more they'll be respected, they'll get stuff done. People want to be in that kind of environment where they're being challenged to make observations and have dialogue around what's actually going on. Gosh, there's one more I was thinking of. This is also kind of one of my pet peeves. Is you've probably seen the Simon Sinek stuff. It starts with why, and there's many things about casting a vision and setting goals and things like that. And at first, I thought that was a little bit of fluff, honestly. But what I've learned is it actually works. The clearer your vision, your goals, your objectives, aligning to these business requirements, the more you can communicate that and just reinforce that, the better off you're going to be. And I see a lot of leaders inside and outside 3M that when you ask them, what's your vision? What does your customer need? they start tossing out cost targets and inventory turns targets and things like that, and it has no relevance to what the vision or the mission of the organization is. And so a great leader needs to inspire that way as well. And again, it sounds kind of cliche, but I've seen it in practice. It's not cliche. There's a reason why it works. So those are, I don't know, what is that, 5, 6 things? I told you it was a long list.
All of them important, and each one, as I think through them, each one could be a separate course that someone would take. Whether doing the course is going to achieve those things is another area of discussion, but each of those things are big areas and important areas. And I think if the people watching this can just think, they might want to replay that bit just to think carefully about all those different areas, because absolutely, I think that they're extremely important. Next thing
and Peter, if I had a chance to reflect on that myself, I might put them in a different order. And I probably could add 2 or 3 more if I thought about it a little bit longer, because it's a long list. The expectations are high for leaders and operations. It's mission critical. It really is.
I think it's a fabulous job these days, or not always, but I think often today it's a much more interesting job than it was in the past. We started talking today about the extent to which manufacturing is changing and operations are changing, the speed that they're changing at. And what you've described there are the skills and that a leader needs, and the types of things they're going to need to do. And that's way more exciting than if the world was staying the same all the time, I think. Maybe not for everybody, but certainly seems to be to me. But you've been dealing with this sort of change recently. I was very interested when I first started talking to you about that you were responsible, or along with others probably, for addressing the shortages of PPE. We know 3M have been, they make the N95 masks and many other things. But you were responsible for helping to address the challenges that the sudden increase in demand for these products has had. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, it's this is a very interesting experience we're having. It's a very unique situation, but the more we're into it, it's really not as unique as it might sound. For us, we're used to this kind of thing. We're used to wide swings in demand. New products that get hot and they fly off the shelf. In the past, I don't know if I told you the story. My first job at 3M was stapling the strap on the side of a respirator mask weeks, literally days and weeks after Mount St. Helens blew up. So I know that dates me a little bit, but my high school happened to be across from the factory that make the respirator masks. And they put out a call to saying, anybody want to work, part-time assembling masks? We just had a mountain blow up and there's dust everywhere. So whether it be a mountain, a volcano, a wildfire, a virus, our healthcare business is very used to swings in demand and emergencies. So with that history, they've got machines and equipment that are mothballed, that are just waiting for action. They have the ability to scale up and add people, train them very quickly. Literally, they walked across the street to our high school and hired a bunch of us off the street, in the 80s. And they're doing the same thing today to add second and third shift. The training is better. They're onboarding them much faster. Things have improved a lot. We're also, this one's kind of coincidental that we were bringing on some additional capacity because we've had a series with SARS and bird flu and the wildfires. We've seen this respirator area swing a lot more wildly. And so we've had some equipment on order that we're able to now deploy and kind of accelerate, and the timing is just perfect. So all those things, mothballed equipment, training people, flexible workforce, and then of course new equipment and capacity. You also probably saw in the news, some of the regional stuff. You probably heard quotes that, we make masks around the world. And we like to do that. We like to make the product where the product is used, so we're not shipping stuff across oceans. And when there's a local problem, you might import stuff from other locations. When it's a national or a global problem, hopefully your supply chain can keep up with that. And in the early days, I would say early March, there was a lot of press where companies were struggling with that. In fact, 3M was noted in the articles. Again, don't believe everything you read. We were working frantically from about January 20th, believe it or not, to solve this problem before it really was even widely known in the U.S. Now, it's my specific role. So my team got called in because we like continuous improvement. We're kind of on the leading edge of technology. We got called in to help support the training effort and bringing on these new employees. So as we bring in a new person into our factory, how do we make them productive and safe on day one? And so we've deployed a digital training method in all our U.S. factories, and it's going really well. We can onboard somebody maybe 50% faster, sometimes 75% faster than typical side-by-side training. As we build a new machine, we can build procedures, standards, all digitally, so that when that new machine gets turned on, the very first person to run it will have like a YouTube type video instruction on how to run that machine right the first time. So we've been very busy. We've been deployed to our plants, working on site side by side with the experts, with operators and maintenance and engineers, helping deploy this technology. And then along the lines, we coach on some other things, just about the whole continuous improvement process, where the idea is coming from. Are we making safety observations? We're trying to do all that in parallel because we don't want to lose sight of that. It's not just about making masks. It's about protecting our employees and protecting our equipment and protecting our customers.
Absolutely, and very useful to hear about, all of the things that need to come together to increase the number of masks that you're making and to respond to that sort of change in demand. This is a very, obviously a very important operations question, and one that people who are learning about operations need to understand.
Well, and it's funny, Peter, you hear about the respirator masks, the face protection, even some of the face shields and some of the medical equipment. You hear about that, but what you don't hear about is that there's also been a run on sandpaper. If you go to your local hardware store, you may find empty shelves because people are doing home improvement projects. They've got a little extra time on their hands. I saw one video where somebody was using our famous blue masking tape to make a maze through their house, like an obstacle course for their 3-year-old, because they were trapped at home with their kids. So the demand for some of those other consumer products, tapes and sandpapers and Post-it notes and all that kind of stuff is actually going up as well. So that doesn't necessarily make the news, but I'm saying our factories are all pretty busy right now because it's just there's just a lot going on, and it'll settle down, and we'll prepare for the next wave. That's what we do. We tap into our huge resource network, and we just wait for the next opportunity or crisis, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a very interesting time to be teaching the course that I'm teaching now in the middle of the pandemic.
Oh, fascinating!
Because there are so many great examples that illustrate operations. Just going into your local supermarket and seeing which things are on the shelves and where there are shortages, where there's been a run on a particular product. And the change in demand patterns and how the supermarkets have been responding to that. There are rich things to learn there that are, harder to explain without these very clear examples of, of the impact of a change in demand and the difficulties of forecasting and all these things. It's very interesting.
Yeah. When have you heard the President of the United States use the word supply chain?
Yes.
Never.
Absolutely.
Right. So all of a sudden people are like, well, what's a supply chain? Well, they go to the grocery store and they figure it out pretty fast. Oh, the stuff's not there. Well, is it on a truck? Is it being manufactured? Is the factory shut down? everybody on the street now is aware of manufacturing and supply chain, which I think is maybe one of the differences between this crisis and any other crisis we faced, is it's global, and the way we talk about it is completely different.
Yeah, and from the point of view of people who are involved with operations and supply chains, it's a great thing because so many people don't understand it. It seems to me, I mean, no particular reason why they should. It's not a criticism of them, but it is something that a lot of people have very little awareness of, even within companies.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think it's impacting everybody. I really do. I think that's a great observation.
My next question, just to turn completely away from that, is I was very interested to learn that you were a keen musician and that you seem to have a very carefully constructed, maybe, life balance, work-life balance, and I thought that was an important lesson for the people who might be watching this. So perhaps you could tell me how you do that. What is it you do there?
Yeah, I'm not sure what a keen musician is. I've never heard that phrase. I'm gonna have to look that up. But anyway, I assume it's good.
I think it's good.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, music is really important to me. I grew up playing saxophone in high school band, and I switched to guitar, and it's a hobby that's turned into a small business, and even a lifestyle. And as you mentioned, it's a work balance thing. I can be very technical and very engineering minded, and then I've got this other side of my brain that I can create and play. It's funny, in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years, how some of those things have come together. Some of the creativity that's involved in making music has been applied to problem solving and communicating differently. So it's taken a long time, but those two sets of skills are kind of coming together now. But I do spend a lot of time with my guitars, and I teach and I play. I do some recording. I do some collaborating with other artists. It's actually been really fun. I was up till 2 in the morning the other night collaborating with some people across the country. So this crisis has provided some opportunities that wouldn't have necessarily been there. If you're interested, if you're a music person, you want to hear some of my work, so it's not just talk, you can go to reverbnation.com and search for Echo, Echo, Echo. That's ECHO, 3 times with a space in between. And you can hear some of my instrumental work and some of my collaborations. And it's an ongoing journey. I mentioned I do some teaching and instructional stuff, but I'm also a student. I'm still learning. I'm taking lessons. I'm trying new instruments. I got into mandolin a couple years ago, and so it's been a very excellent lifelong journey. Something to it. You can play music at all ages too. So I think I picked a good one that, I know people in their 90s that are playing. So it's fantastic. They're not playing basketball or football, but they're playing their instruments.
And very important, I think, for people who are students today, so younger, earlier in the career, to keep this important, the idea that that they do need a good work-life balance, that an interest, a keen, active interest outside of work is extremely important, and good that you described it. And just as you mentioned, the collaborations that we've seen online that have been musically based over the past few weeks have been absolutely unbelievable. I mean, the Juilliard Bolero thing video that they did, I thought was fabulous, and and there have been lots of other things too in other music forms, but fabulous things to be able to see.
Yeah.
Then the last question I've got, you started to look more at the advice that you might have for people who are going to be working in manufacturing in the future. I just thought I'd conclude with a question, which was basically, what final words of advice would you have for someone considering a manufacturing career?
Yeah, you saved a hard one for the end here. Let me start by saying there's a lot of different career paths. So it's really hard to say this is the path to success, or the path that's traditional or typical. I kind of went in with maybe some expectations, but because of the company I work for, I was offered some different opportunities, and so one might look at my career path and my resume and say, well, that doesn't look normal at all. To me, it feels pretty normal. It feels pretty good. But what I tell people, and I do a lot of recruiting of young engineers, and I say, manufacturing is where it's at. It's so rewarding. It's the full spectrum of invention, prototyping, scale up, which is my personal favorite, continuous improvement, ongoing operations. If you get on the capital side, installing new equipment, new technologies, it can be kind of fun. You get all the new toys. It's not the stereotypical, smoke-filled factory that you see in the movies. It's high tech. It's engaging. You really get to touch everything. I mean, I've been a consultant. I've taught statistics. I've done supply chain. I did work in a lab for a while. I worked on a couple of process patents. So I've actually got 3 U.S. patents, which was not my intention. It just happened, right? So I can't say enough of good things about it. I think it's very underrated, and maybe the stereotype is a little bit negative. I've also observed that mid-market companies, companies that are maybe 100 million to 500 million in sales, there's a lot of action there. They've got their feet to the fire. It's an exciting environment, and 3M is really a conglomerate of a bunch of those. So, yeah, big companies have an economic impact too, but I think we're special because we run like a bunch of small businesses, and small means fast, exciting, things change rapidly, you don't get bored. We're not like a car company and we just make cars. Those are big companies. I don't think the economy really revolves around them. I don't, nothing against car manufacturers, but I don't think it's as exciting as 60,000, unique products across a whole bunch of different businesses. So that's why I like 3M, and that's why I think there's a lot of excitement in these smaller, $100 million opportunities. I would also say that, being in the business in manufacturing pretty much for 34 years, and being around it really my whole life, there's always problems to be worked on. There's always opportunities. There's a wide range of disciplines, whether you're a chemical, mechanical, electrical, computer, engineer, let's say, after a couple of years in your career, nobody really cares. They're like, do you like to solve problems? Do you have some, mathematical and science background? Great, go for it. So I think you can do a lot of things with a lot of different degrees and a lot of different, academic studies. You can apply that a lot of different ways. It's really cool. Now, I was going to end with one other thing is, that flexibility and that jumping around. It is exciting. My father, who was a 3Mer as well, he joined in 1963. He was a high school social studies teacher for a couple of years, and he was coaching on the side, coaching some football. And he got hired by 3M to be an HR manager, and so he worked in HR and manufacturing operations for 39 years. And again, that just says it kept him interested for all that time, kept me interested. And he went from being a teacher to being an HR person, to being a plant manager, to, many, many different roles, mostly HR related, but some operations. And again, that just goes to show it doesn't matter really what your degree is in. It just, do you like to solve problems? Do you like the challenge? Do you like the innovation? Do you have the people skills? My dad was phenomenal at that. So I think that got him where he went. He wasn't an engineer. But I think, that maybe helps break down the stereotype a little bit. It's not, you get this degree, you do this job, you get this promotion. It's a path that's all over the place. And these little manufacturing businesses really drive the economy. And you're seeing that now during this crisis, how important it is.
I really appreciate you talking to me today, Michael. It's I have no doubt that it's very valuable to the people who will watch it, and you've been very generous with your time, so thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Peter. My pleasure.